And sometimes people who are playing here say, well, they ask about the stick. And I kind of want them to see, like, what do you think about stick? And because I'm not here to tell them just what I think about stick. And then now that you're playing with it, what did your horse think about it? Well, how does your horse feel about stick? Well, this was okay and this wasn't okay. And let them decipher and notice, did it build rapport? And like, were you effective without the stick? And or were you effective with no tack today? How did it feel to be at liberty? Like, oh my God, I had no idea I could do everything at liberty. Well, there you have it. This relationship doesn't have to have so much force and pressure. It's important maybe that people learn how to use apparatus uh, properly and fairly. And what about the piece where the horses will do all the same relational movements without it?
Mm, yes.
Like, how do you unsee that?
I guess I want people to know that naked, without apparatus, without being the baby that reaches for the object, the objet, and says thwack, 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 right? And
Yes.
that's a way of, it's like a transmission between the human vessel and the world, is me and the world, but also me and a transient object, an apparatus in the world. That's in bound into our brain, that we want to not just uh, touch something, but we want to touch something with something. We don't just want to tend to something. We want to tend to something with something. All of our things have a thing, right? Go to IKEA and you imagine now all the things you need for your things,
Mhm.
right? And then those things have things. Well, we have a thing which is a horse, and then we have things for our horse, and then we have things for our horses, and it's this like inception mushroom cloud that kind of continues. And I have also trained with sticks. I've trained with sticks as frequently as 1 year ago, because I thought, maybe I'm a zealot, maybe I'm an extremist. Imagine if I might be an unreasonable extremist of the anti-stick. Imagine if I'm being silly, and imagine if I'm putting pressure on myself unnecessarily by eschewing and forbidding myself certain apparatus, even for good reasons. I don't want to buy into my own press. So, you know what? Once again, I will take up the stick. Once again, I will. And I've had many seasons. But this time I took up the stick and I called a friend of mine who is extremely experienced and qualified in a very specific way of training horses classically, where sticks are present. And every time I've seen horses in that system trained, I could argue some details, but generally speaking, those horses always look very peaceful in their work. I could argue details, but I could argue details till the horses came home, and my horses are home. So I argue details. But I decided to call someone, a friend, a confidant, a mentor, a colleague, to come and do lessons with me every week on my farm, because they happened to live locally at the time. And one day they came to my farm and they said, "I've got some presents for you." I said, "Well, here's a Swiss chard I've been growing. It's in a pot, and here's a aloe vera, and I made some jam. Here's some jam, and look, I've got a cherry stick. I found a cherry tree, and they make the best training sticks. They went and cut a beautiful wand from a cherry tree, like Harry Potter, and they took all the bits off of it and they smoothed it out, and it was pliable and pliant and swishy. And they said, okay. And we went into our arena and we started working on stuff. And I was like, and they're like, this is just an extension of your arm. And I'm like, yep, that I've heard that. I've heard that many, many times. Got that. I understand that. I'm now, you know,
Bigger,
I'm
longer.
I'm the inflatable man at the used car sales yard. I've
Or
got
one.
long
Yeah.
arms, right? Okay,
Yeah.
great. I'm like, I got that. And now my horse doesn't have to think which part of their body I'm gesturing to, because my arms are long enough to just touch that body part. And I thought, well, what a nice mental economy for my horses that they don't have to think, where is he gesturing? Oh, he's gesturing to my hip. Let me move around that, which is how I actually use pressure now. I'll gesture, and the horse tracks my hand. And with my timing, they formulate their body around where my gesture is gesturing. The gesture is gesturing. That's how I use it
Like
now.
billiards.
The
They're
billiard.
they're they're doing geometry.
Billiards, that's a great way to put it. So they're sort of bouncing off the container and then finding their way to go in the hole, hit the target. Yes. And so that's how I use it now. But I thought, you know what? Some days my horses don't have the spoons for that. And so the mental economy of simply being able to reach and touch, but also be over there in the front, I can be everywhere all at once with my horse, with my arm extenders. That's a nice mental economy. I thought, that's lovely. And so we started to train and we train, and it was like, okay, I can be pretty, I can be pretty with it, and I can be particular, and I don't have to put so much dancery body language into my body anymore. My body can just be more passive because the stick works for me. The apparatus works for me. So I can just be free to make myself look as elegant as possible. Okay. Not saying that's bad or good. I'm just saying that's what it was. And I proceeded a little bit. Eventually, what started to happen for me as I was practicing and everything was going well was that every now and then, under the radar, the tiniest blip, I'm talking a grain of sand under a duvet, like a grain of sand under a duvet, something passed across the horse's mindscape that the stick just smoothed away. And I'm talking the tiniest passing. We're talking, you're driving down a highway and there's an ant on the side of the highway you don't see, but it's there and you just go right on past it with your apparatus. And because I was moving with my apparatus, which makes your body bigger, turns you into some sort of machine, the earliest form of a machine, because you're no longer just a biological vessel. You're now super biology because you've got apparatus attached to you, like a car. You don't see the ant on the side of the highway because the apparatus is moving too quickly and it's too powerful. It overrides that awareness. But if I was walking down the highway with just my biological vessel, I would see that ant on the highway. And if I looked at that ant on the highway, I would see where it was moving. I would see that it was moving in a line. I would see that it was moving in a line, and oh, in the front and the back of it, they had colleagues with it. And there was actually a whole logic on the side of the highway that was headed towards a dead animal on the side of the highway that the ants were breaking down and moving back into their nest. And now I see that. And then I look at the dead animal and I see, how did that animal die? Well, it got hit by an apparatus. So as I was training, every now and then there was an ant on the side of the highway in the training that I was able to just move on past. And it looked like the tiniest wobble at the top of the inside shoulder blade. The tiniest wobble, I'm talking millimeters. It's like bonito flakes, wafer thin wobble at the top of the inside shoulder blade that was explained to me as just lost his balance. You correct that balance into a correct balance now, and here's your stick, and here's the technique, and you correct it. And I went, oh, okay, that's nice. If there's a problem, I can nip it in the bud. And it's so small that you don't even see it because the apparatus is moving you forward. And then there would be like the gentlest sway across the loins, which looked like destabilizing across the loins. And I'm talking not big, again, wafer thin millimeters, or there would be a glassiness to the eye, intermittent. It would come and go. As soon as you try to find it again, like water, it would filter through the hands and disappear again. A glassiness in the eye, and then the stick would come on and elegantly, delicately, without pain or intimidation, and with the best of intentions, the stick would come and the glassiness would be gone because now the horse is present with the apparatus and the horse continues moving forward. And as these things started to accumulate gently, 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 it wasn't just a grain of sand. It wasn't just a singular ant anymore. It started to build. And what I realized is that for me, The apparatus looked really good. It looked really elegant, and it did mentally economize, and it did make my body bigger. It did all of those things. But what it also did was elegantly, gently, and in a sophisticated, extremely sophisticated manner, physically overpower the horse,
Railroading.
railroading, and facilitate me to colonize the body according to my want, my forging. I was forging, and it was beautiful and it was delicate. It was like filigree gold work, jewelry. And then one day I found myself in the forest, going towards the forest. And we have this phenomenon here where spiders fly in a certain wind and barometric pressure. They go into the air and they cast their silken threads into the air. And then the threads land across the spring grasses. And then they trail in the wind like gossamer threads across grasses. It's really a beautiful phenomenon that happens here. And this had just occurred. Now, in the gentle breeze, spring breeze, across the trail on the way to the forest, there was a thick gossamer thread from a tall weed across the track. And my horse, Sani, and I had my stick with me because I'm like, I'm giving this a good shot. And I'd never hit him with it. And Sani was the horse who forbid me to use sticks when I first met him, forbid me because he was beaten with them when he was younger. Well, I had rehabilitated him to the stick, and the stick was working beautifully, filigree artwork, but still ant on the side of the highway. So across the road was a white, glowing in the sun, filigree a spider web. And he came up to it and he planted. And I went, oh no, come on, go forwards. And I didn't touch him with the stick. I just used my voice and gently squeezed with my legs and said, go forwards. And he went, oh, awareness to the apparatus. And he went through it. And then he went through another spider web. And then he went through another. Having said that, he lives at home and there's spider webs at home as well. I thought, you know what that is. It was like waving in the wind. And then I stopped and I realized, oh my God, it looks like my electric fencing. It looks like my electric fencing. And by that point, he had gone through maybe 12 of them. And I quickly dismounted and he looked at me with wide eyes and he went, why would you ask me to go through the fences like that? And I went, due to apparatus, he was willing to take the shock for me. And then I understood why dressage was there to prepare the warhorse. And I went, holy dude, I'm so sorry. He was so shaken. And I
Yeah.
turned around and I walked him home. And on the way home, I looked at the stick and I threw it into the bushes and I'm not picking it up again.
Yes. Yes. I too picked up a natural, swishy, this is natural. This is more like natural to them. This one looks more like nature to them. I too have those sticks, and yeah, you can feel the tension. I can hear and feel the tension underneath the beauty and the use of the apparatus is still the tension of what's missing. And what I think we're not speaking to is a feeling underneath it that gets invoked when you're back in the question of, am I doing the thing now where I already saw it and I already know, but I'm doing it again? Have
Mm,
I taken up the stick again? And even though we both took up wispy sticks and tried other things, the question still was there. How much force is necessary? And the subtle intuitive message you were getting in your animal body from your horses was, I'm having a little micro death. I'm having a micro fear. I'm having a micro checkout. I'm the ant on the side of the road. And because you're attending, even when you're trying not to, at the subtle level, we're still getting hit by the ping of the incongruency. We're still getting hit by the fear. And this fear is so powerful. Again, back to the early conversation, the fear of predation will cause animals to abandon, as you mentioned earlier, too, certain landscapes and change the whole way that the ecosystem works out of fear. And so, if we're evolving and we're trying to do something differently, at some point, will we be willing to put down the tool fear?
Mm.
That's what stick is. Stick is fear.
And
And
fear,
so many things bring
fear is
fear.
not always the spooking horse, the bolting horse. It's not always the stereotype we have in our mind of fear. Some horses, when they're afraid, look exceptionally calm.
Mm.
Some horses, when they're afraid, are friends with their fear and actually allow them to create very decisive, quiet, clear decisions for their well being due to fear, like the elk who calmly move out of hunting territory days before hunting season. They're not running in a panic like a Hollywood film running from Godzilla, right? They're just calmly up and move.
Mm.
And a lot of fear in trained horses, they know that their lives are probably not in danger. It's not that kind of fear. It's a nuance. This requires nuance, this conversation on fear. I so agree with you. The type of fear can be so well disguised and hidden in plain sight that it looks like a compliant horse, an elegant horse, a well-trained horse. I will just respond. I will respond to the apparatus because your body is now bigger. Having said that, I remember when I was 14 years old, I hiked through the Bogong High Plains, Victoria High Country in Australian High Country, where there are brumbies.
Mm.
And I was up on the Bogong High Plains with a heavy backpack, and out in the distance there was a dust cloud, and our guide said, "That's a herd of brumbies." They saw our animal bodies from maybe 3 kilometers away and knew exactly what to do with that. My body did not need to be any bigger than the ant on the side of the road to them, for them to see, because they don't have apparatus. They're moving through this earth slowly enough and present enough and aware enough with a 270-degree vision field that they can see the ant on the side of the road, the rock in the distance, and 3 kilometers away, there's a naked ape on the horizon. And so my body will respond. And so to the people who say, I need the arm extended to create response, I say, have you ever seen wild horses at a distance respond to you? And do you know that you can recover your domesticated horse's sensitivity if they're kept outside of a box, which is a sensory deprivation chamber, if they are trained that touch and non-escalating pressure actually has exponential responsivity potential, which is what I'm working on right now with my team. We're working with each other to just touch the horse without escalation and to discover that when the horse is healthy and well and able, there is exponential response that will occur there that has this glowing, smooth quality to it, which I'm addicted to. And if you touch the horse and there's no exponential response, well, maybe there's a good reason why, and we shouldn't seek to overpower that, but instead look at the reasons why the horse isn't able. And usually lifestyle, usually they haven't been moving much. Maybe it's diet, maybe it's pain, maybe they're tired. And we shouldn't overpower that. This is what goes through my mind and keeps me awake late at
It's
night.
like the connection and the touch is like clay, right? If we
Yes.
grab a hold of the clay, it actually firms up against us and
Mm,
it's more dense. But if we seek into the clay with a softness, it starts to warm, just
mm,
touch meeting touch. And then we have a viscous, maybe this is the golden thing you're talking about. We have like a viscous in between state between us of piezoelectric matter between beings. And they're definitely perceiving us from a distance, as you pointed to. And then they're perceiving us at all these other layers as we get closer and closer. And I think one of the tricks, and I thought of this earlier in the conversation, Lucky, is that we're living with our horses. And so a lot of our friends and colleagues are maybe training, but not living with a herd. And, these herds have really educated us. They have educated the heck out of us through thick and through thin. And I'm thinking about how an injured horse here recently, Maya, an elder who passed away, was in pain in the last weeks of her life. And she had been here for like a decade. And I was putting on her jacket to keep her warm. And she turned around to the side and bit the side of my breast really hard and left a big black mark there. And, later I would discover she was in pain.
Mm.
So when we think about these wild animals that we've domesticated and we're living with, and we wonder about, as I often do, when they use force, when they use pressure, how much is necessary, that was a very clear and demonstrative way that she, with lots of force and pressure, made a communication with me. And so they're going to just like this horror story that you shared with about that beautiful Arabian mare, they're going to do what they have to do when they're under pressure and when force or pain and fear have entered into the equation. And we won't be able to control every situation. And we will, because we're living closely with horses, get these other lessons, all these other lessons. And it helps me. It didn't feel good to be bitten, but here I am now, weeks later with Rayson in the stall, and I'm awake and aware that this horse is in pain and I'm not going to go to sleep again. Now I remember like, oh, horse in pain may enter into fear body and respond differently to me when I'm in these zones of predation in the body. And some of the rapport that we had may not be as clear when she's in her pain body. And I want to be careful and respectful and allow her to still have her dignity and be able to communicate with me while she's in her pain body.
I just had a light bulb based upon what you said. And we're going to wrap up the podcast in a moment because I really would love you to go to bed because you're up
Yeah,
very late. But um,
I'm doing great.
you mentioned Maya prior to
Mm-hmm.
passing was in pain, and that she told you she was in pain by firming up the amount of pressure she used and used as little as possible, but as much as necessary to let her issue, her need, her want, desire, and communication be known with you without patience and without any warning, communicated to you with violence. But it wasn't an egregious violence that killed you. You knew she wasn't going to kill you, but it did hurt you.
It was in the
It,
dark. She was afraid. There were
right,
things involved. Yeah.
right. And so it hurt you physically. And if you were not mentally and emotionally healthy as you are, Laurie, another horse person who wasn't as mentally and emotionally salient could have been hurt mentally and emotionally by that, taken it personally. How dare they? They've been here 10 years. They're old. I've taken care of them their whole life. How dare they? Right? They could have gone in that direction, but you didn't. You went, curious. Why did you firm up with me? Like a Newtonian liquid, like quicksand. If you hit it hard, it's a firm surface. If you go soft, it yields to you. Newtonian liquid. And so she did this to you. And so if we engage, it behooves us to understand that if we're going to learn from horses about how to train horses, if we are going to say, I use the horse's language with the horse, well, if the horse's language is, I use as much force, pressure, and or violence as necessary, but as little as possible to make my point be known. When horses use that, is it possible horses use that when they are communicating that I am in pain, I am in breakdown, I am unwell, I am in an emergency, And if we train horses like that on a regular basis, is it then possible that when we are on a Thursday afternoon taking a horse out of a stall and putting them through their paces with this principle and practice, we are communicating to the horses, hey, I'm a naked monkey and I'm unwell. I'm in emergency. I'm not in a good place and I'm in pain. And horses are going, that monkey is in pain, is unwell, and is not okay. And that is where the fear comes from. Not because they're afraid of us, but they're potentially afraid for us. They're not well. I can't trust them to take care of me because they're not even in a place to take care of themselves or of this space or of this union. So I am afraid because I am partnered with an unwell creature. It's like standing next to a dog with rabies.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, you know, and so that's where the fear might be coming from, not because they'll say, oh, the horse isn't afraid for their life. Look, I'm not hurting them. No, you're not hurting them, but the horse is afraid for you and by you by association because you're communicating in this space, in this territory, that
The ambiguity, the incongruency, the
that I'm
misalignment
unwell. I'm
is
unwell.
it's unwell. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's the thing most frightening to horses is this um, lack of leadership. And it's also the twist is the best we could offer them is the leadership that would show them you can count on me.
I am
I am
well.
I am well. And so when Oliver looks over like, what are you gonna do? I say, I got something for you.